And greetings. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast, alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I am Steve Deace, and we are brought to you today by a brand new partner on the show. I want to highlight you. We always like to welcome new partners right here off the jump. Lassie Health is where you want to go and look if you are looking for an alternative to the current spiraling cost of health insurance. Now, it's not health insurance. It's access to health care in case you want it without all the red tape, restrictions, and inflated costs. Coverage starts as low as just $30 a month. You get transparent pricing, comprehensive coverage tailored to your needs, and access to healthcare services without breaking the bank. There's no annual or lifetime caps on services. You can start a plan at any time. For as low as $30 a month, you can get over 400 prescription medications for free unlimited virtual mental health counseling, free 24/7 virtual urgent care, lab tests up to 60% off, imaging tests up to 75% off, procedures and surgeries over 50% off, and that is their entry-level plan right there. That's their most basic plan. All right, that just goes to show you Lassie Health is a game changer. Check out affordable plans that put you in control of your health care at healthylink.com/Steve. For a limited time, get your first month for free, up to $100 off eligible plans. So get healthy, be healthy, stay healthy without breaking the bank at healthylink.com/Steve. And we welcome them here to the program. We welcome you as well. Coming up today, Theology Thursday. This would normally be the week that we'd get into the mailbag. But since I kind of called an audible last week, I thought there was something we had to address that pertained to the subject matter, but maybe it was a little bit more of a broader application. We're going to go back and make up for that this week, if you guys are okay with it, and go back to our verse by verse. We're in chapter 3 of Romans as we speak. That'll be next hour. So you do not want to miss that. There's so much stuff going on. I don't even know where to begin. We've got a Congressman, Rich McCormick, coming on here at the bottom of the hour. If you're wondering who he was the only guy that asked any good questions of Anthony Fauci a month and a half ago when they had that complete, crap show of a hearing. Okay. So if you don't know where to begin, let's begin where we always do. Let's go to Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Biden Speaks, but he didn't say much.
My leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
Biden addressed the nation in what's believed to be a taped message from the Oval Office last night, explaining, but not really, why he's dropping his re-election bid. The Biden White House, from Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday to Biden's address last night, are being uber careful to avoid saying the president is stepping down from his re-election bid for health or cognitive reasons.
Burn that shit! Burn that shit!
That was the scene earlier in the day in Washington, D.C., as a horde of pro-Hamas orcs were shipped into the Capitol for the expressed purpose of wreaking carnage before and during Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu's speech before Congress. The mob tore down American flags, replaced them with so-called Palestinian flags, and burned the former. The orcs were violent, sorry for the redundancy, vandalizing historic monuments, and at points, police had to use pepper spray to disperse the hordes.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC. Right now, outside this building, not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Netanyahu thanked the United States for its continued support of Israel during its ongoing conflict with Hamas, but the prime minister caught flack from some right-wingers for these comments.
October 7th is a day that will forever live in infamy. Suddenly, heaven turned into hell. 3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. They butchered 1,200 people from 41 countries, including 39 Americans. Proportionately, compared to our population size, that's like 20 9/11s in one day.
Moving on, the New York Post yesterday, citing a Biden family source, reported that former President Barack Obama was livid, not that Joe Biden dropped his re-election bid, but that he turned around and endorsed Kamala Harris for president. The source told the New York Post Obama believes Harris can't win, and that's why he hasn't endorsed Harris yet. This morning, multiple outlets are now reporting Obama is indeed set to endorse the vice president. FBI Director Chris Wray testified in front of a House committee yesterday and dropped some interesting nuggets about would-be Trump assassin Thomas Matthew Crooks, including this one.
One of the things that I can share here today that has not been shared yet is that we've just in the last couple of days found that from our review, to your point about devices, analysis of a laptop that the investigation ties to the shooter reveals that on July 6th, he did a Google search for, quote, how far away was Oswald from Kennedy? And so that's a search that obviously is significant in terms of his state of mind. That is the same day that it appears that he registered for the Butler rally.
And finally, this.
I used to believe everything I'd see on the news, but that's before I discovered a brain.
A brain is meant for everyday use. Those living with moderate to severe stupidity have seen immediate improvement in common sense with a brain.
I thought the government had my best interests at heart, and then a friend told me about a brain.
Talk to your doctor about what news sources you obey. A brain may also lower your desire to take life-altering advice from celebrities.
Getting lectured about my carbon footprint from people with 3 private jets used to make sense. But thanks to a brain, now I can think for myself every day. When my disregard for third-grade biology began to flare up, I knew it was time for a brain.
Do not try a brain if you're allergic to a brain. Common side effects may include accountability, discernment, homeschooling your kids, a better understanding of economics, awareness of the stupidity of socialism, and diarrhea.
For tethering yourself to reality, the only no-brainer is choosing a brain. Ask your doctor if a brain is right for you.
For more information, visit tryabrain.com.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron, I want you to mark this tape, and I don't even remember what the leader in the clubhouse was up until this point, but as of today, July 25th, that is your new leader for Video of the Year coming up in our year-end show in December.
I'm going to have to write this down.
That video is absolutely incredible. Make sure you write this down. As of today, I mean, that it's incredible. I mean, that video is absolutely incredible. Also incredible, our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company who are the reasons that Aaron was able to do his montage today. It's brought to you by them, the Christian-owned Patriot Coffee Company that stands for the same values of faith, family, and freedom as you. And they've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American, and they don't sell burnt coffee like the big box stores. It's shipped to you within days of being roasted with the roast on date right there on each and every bag. All right, if you want to try it today, firstcup.com is where you want to go. Use the promo code DACE for the discount. Firstcup.com, promo code DACE. Again, that's firstcup.com, promo code DACE. All right, a couple of items that I want to highlight in Aaron's montage. There's 3 points I want to make. Number one, on the idea that they're saving democracy over there. This is a democracy so sacred. It's a democracy so precious that we have to suspend democratic principles in order to save it. Such a sacred democracy. Such an incredible democracy, as Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi kept saying it in the Star Wars prequels. But what about democracy, Anakin? Yes.
This is the heart of the buy-sell-hold submission we had yesterday. Over 50% of Democrats probably would say it's okay to steal an election as long as they save democracy.
Which means that word, you keep using that word, I don't think it means what you think it means, to quote another movie. Yeah. But it's such a sacred democracy. Such a precious democracy, and it is a my precious, if you're picking up what I'm laying down there. So sacred and precious that we just had to nullify the votes of everybody that cast a ballot in the Democratic primary for the last 4 months. Just had to nullify all those votes. And then not give them a mechanism by which they're working now on just doing have you guys seen this? I saw this morning. They're working now on doing a voice roll call before the convention. so that they would just hand her the nomination before they even get there and go through the pomp and circumstance. That's being discussed in their media now. I read that this morning. So it's such a sacred and precious democracy that we had to try to assassinate our political opponent. That's how precious and sacred it is. By the way, the dude Googled how far away was Oswald from JFK and then registered for a conference right after that, or registered for an event right after that. That was the Trump rally. And that didn't... Does anybody know why does anyone know why we have all this equipment to monitor everything we do and say, I can Google... How about I Google, I finna kill Trump in 10. Okay? I Google this, and then what if I register for the Trump rally right after that? Should that not flag something? What is the point of all this surveillance equipment, of us being constantly under surveillance? And is that not just as on the nose as it gets? I'm going to Google how far away was Oswald from JFK, and then my next bookmark is registering for the Trump rally, and then I'm going to shimmy up a wall with a rifle. They're going to shoot me from 400 yards away, even though I'm less than 150 yards away, and they couldn't stop me from getting that close. Come on, man. Come on.
It's so on the nose. I'm not even sure what he said even happened.
I rolled my eyes at that.
Did he actually do that, Google?
Yeah.
You know what was remarkable yesterday too? You said you didn't watch too much of the Chris Wray testimony yesterday in front of Congress. Usually this guy is just full of non-answers, evasive, will never actually talk. I'm not familiar with that. You'll have to refer that to blah, blah, blah. You'll have to do that. And he was, it was kind of run-of-the-mill evasive. But on this topic, he actually went into detail about what he knew for once. I'm not accustomed to that from Chris Wray or really anybody in government.
So everybody's spider sense should be tingling then, is what you're telling me.
It's just weird.
So they just went out and the
benign, innocent explanation is that he was very forthcoming about this issue because it makes another government law enforcement agency look really, really bad.
Yes.
And so that's the benign, innocent explanation for why he was so comfortable and really cordial, even with some of these lines of questioning. But man, that's weird.
So, I always like to say that history doesn't just repeat, it also rhymes. The Devil Has a Greatest Hits album, just re-racks it for new generations. So we went out and found another guy with Maggie's drawers, okay? Who wasn't a good shot, and he somehow, in the case of Oswald, stood on a street corner in one of the largest cities in America, holding pro-Castro, pro-Soviet, pro-communist signs and handing out literature, and that somehow in the Cold War era, where kids are being taught at school how to duck and cover from nuclear bombs, okay? When atomic bomb sirens are happening next to tornado siren and fire hydrant or fire threat alerts and tests. In that era of hyper paranoia, a guy is just openly in an urban area in one of the biggest cities in America, just handing out anti-American communist literature, and just managed to get a shot within, 50, 100 yards from JFK from a perfect angle. Didn't get anybody's attention at all. In the paranoia, we've got McCarthy hearings happening in this era and everything else. And Lee Harvey Oswald just walks into the Texas Book Depository, wasn't flagged by anybody, with a rifle, and assumes the position. Seems legit, right? In this era of mass surveillance, dude logs on Google. How far away was Oswald from Trump? Jot that down. Next, okay, register for Trump rally. Didn't flag anything. Nothing. How many times has Tim Pool said he's been swatted?
Yeah.
How many times? How many times did Bannon say he was swatted? So these guys can get swatted, but a dude can go online, Google. We only know because of what this is the director of the FBI. Well, he Googled how far away was Oswald from Trump, and then right after that, registered for the Trump rally. That did, if the surveillance state is not going to flag that, then I think once and for all, the argument that we have to be willing to subject ourselves to these un-American civil rights, civil liberties abuses in order to catch the bad guys out there. I think once and for all, that argument's been defeated. Fair? I think that one's done. We're done here with that one.
This is like the instant replay argument. We have to get it right, but we never do.
Yes. I mean, I that blows my mind. That
they're busy. In their defense, they're busy hunting down moms for liberty and Catholics, Steve.
And there's grandmothers, that are praying in front of abortion
Yes.
clinics that must go to prison. Yes, I understand that. Okay.
That whole everything you just said now. Is that the most surreal bit you've ever done on this entire show?
I did not actually plan to do that. It just kind of evolved as I was only going to do 2 points. The 2 points I told you after the montage I wanted to address right before we went back to us. And then as I'm just organically talking, I'm like, that is some straight up, what right there. Okay. That is some bullshit right there. Okay. Dude Googled, what's that? How to kill president. What is a rifle? How to find bullets, where to purchase such paraphernalia. How far away was Oswald?
Can the NSA
and then I registered for Trump. Come on, man. Come on. Okay.
And then I wander around with the drone.
And then then my screen name is I finna kill Trump at 69me.com. No, really. I mean, this is just it's surreal, man. It's absolutely surreal. It's just, I feel like, I told you guys this the other day off the air. It feels like since July 13th, we are back in what life was like from March 16th, 2020 on. Like, is no one else like reading these studies? Is no one else looking at this data? Is no one else like, you just have to scroll past the headline. The headline, if you actually scroll to the third paragraph, how many times do we do that? Guys, if you scroll to the third paragraph of the story, you'll see it totally contradicts what's in the headline. Does nobody else, are we weirdos? Is no one else doing this? Right? Didn't we have those conversations a lot during the early days of all of this? 4 years ago, it feels like that again. I want to set the record straight on something historically that I think is very important for Christians, particularly. And since it deals with what has been really an inflection point of American foreign policy for going on 70 years, really, this is also true of every single one of us. Okay? There's this, and there's good reason for this. There is a fairly significant movement within the Christian church that has used theological basis for why we have to be staunch advocates of Israel. Okay? And if you go back and listen to a lot of our shows in the past, we've gone into a lot of these variations and discussed these things on Theology Thursdays, or what's the difference between dispensational and covenantal theology. And I'll be happy to do all that stuff again because I'm a theo nerd and I love those conversations, but they're really, really not relevant here. And so what you're seeing now is a group of people who are within Christianity who have the more historical Christian view of Israel and the church, which is called covenantal theology. Okay, that's its basis. They have a more historical view of this more than the more recent, and when I say recent, I'm not talking like last week, okay? But dispensational theology is about 200 years old, a little less, okay, as we know it now. And so that's the theology that and eschatology that the vast majority of you as Christians have been taught. And if you're a non-Christian that you have heard, you've kind of picked up, with phrases like rapture and things of that nature, and that have kind of gotten into the gen pop from pop culture and the Left Behind books, which are, I think, the most successful series of Christian fiction ever written. Okay. I don't even think we have to, what I'm about to do does not even require us to wade back into that debate, which I'm happy to do again in the future. I'm sure we will. We've done it before. I'm happy to do that. But really, we just have to look at history. The first war that this country ever fought, formally, was against what were called the Barbary Coast Pirates. Who were they? Muslims. They were Muslims. And this is where the Marines were founded, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. You ever wonder what's that a reference to? What I'm about to tell you. That's what it's a reference to. And when they were confronted, I think it was actually by Thomas Jefferson as an ambassador confronted them. I think it was at the time. I could be wrong about that part. But when they were confronted by whomever was serving as was one of our ambassadors at that time and asked, dude, we literally just got out of a revolution, man. We don't even know. We barely know which way is up as a country. What are you doing here? Like we're no threat to you guys. Why are you doing this? They were literally told, Muhammad told us to do this to people like you. That's literally what our ambassador was told. Or Muhammad, as it would have been spelled back in those days. Okay, Muhammad told us to do this to kufr, unbelievers, infidels like you. These were acts of terrorism, basically kidnapping soldiers, seamen, shipmen, holding them for ransom, murdering them. That was the first official war this country ever fought. In the late 18th century, where was the nation of Israel in the late 18th century, guys? Nowhere is the answer. Did not exist. In fact, the nation of Israel would not exist until May 15th, would not exist again until May 15th, 1948. So we're almost 200 years after this war with the Barbary Coast pirates. So what did our obsession and close alliance with the nation of Israel, the Zionist state, what did that do to provoke the Barbary Coast pirate Islamo-fascist from attacking us? What did it do, guys?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We were seen as an advent and an emerging power of the Christian West, and our love for Jesus made him hate us all by itself. But long before anybody knew what a United Nations was, anyone even considered regrouping and reforming the nation of Israel. Wasn't even a gleam in the globalist eye. Okay? Let's go back even further. The Holy Roman Empire, why was it formed? What were the Crusades about? Islamic conquerors. It was a response to them. Islam came after Christianity. Attacked the West, attacked Europe, took over the Holy Land, and was literally within city blocks of Paris before finally the church united with the military powers of Europe at the time. This is where you get to people like Charlemagne and people like that, okay? And did so in order to stop the Islamic conquest of the nascent emergence of what would later become known as Western civilization. I have that history correct? Yeah.
In those eras, so we're talking 7th, 8th, 9th century now. In that era, where was the nation of Israel in that era? Hadn't existed for hundreds of years. It ended in between 70 and 110 AD with not one but two Roman oppressive put-downs of the nation of Israel, ending the country. Hadn't existed since the first century. So we're over half a millennia away. So there's no Zionist movement. There's no globalist Zionist conspiracy that the U.S. is aligned with that caused the Islamo-fascists to come after us at this point in time. They just did it organically all on their own, correct?
Yes.
Correct. So my point being, how much has the nation of Israel's existence needed to matter to get Islam to attack Christendom? How much? None. None is the answer. Absolutely none. Because they see the two of us basically as one. We're the people of the book. We are co-kufar. We are co-infidels. We have hijacked their Abrahamic religion. They are the one true way. The covenant went through Ishmael and not Isaac, as both Christians and Jews believe. We are similarly afflicted. Our beliefs about one another as Christians and Jews are immaterial, irrelevant to Islam. Irrelevant. And they have proven this for literally hundreds of years on the battlefield. They have proven this. They do not need a Zionist presence in Israel to come after Christendom. And they have done it multiple times and hundreds upon hundreds of years before anyone knew or remembered what a Zionist was. So no, our alliance with Israel is not causing an uptick in Islamic radicalism.
Islam. Islam is causing an uptick in Islamic radicalism, and it has since Muhammad came out of the cave. Islam is a religion founded by a guy who died fighting wars for the last 20 years of his life. Literal wars. You don't even need a theological interpretation here. You just need to see Islamic theology for what it really is and history for what it really was. That's all. And speaking of that history, it's playing out again right now. What I'm about to show you should be the defining image of this presidential election right here. Right here. Right here. This is it right here. This is the choose ye this day. Which way? Which way you want to go? Queers for Hamas and Islamo-fascist simps burning American flags outside your buildings and on your subsidized college campuses. Or the defiance you see there on the other side of that graphic with the American flag in the backdrop. One guy for all of his faults. And man, there aren't many shows on the right with a larger audience that have been more confrontational about pointing them out than this one has over the years, correct?
For sure.
But we also pointed out this guy's literally taken bullets from the spirit of the age. So this is the choice. When you boil it all down, this is really the choice. Is this graphic right here is the choice. That's really where we are. Which way? I can't make it any plainer than that graphic right there that our social media team came up with yesterday at the Blaze. That's it. That's the choice right there. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, it's fitting we end with that. As I said, the beginning was probably one of the most surreal things you've ever said, and you've spent your career trying to give people eyes to see and ears to hear anew. But the times that we live in, yes, there's nothing new under the sun. But for our people, our generation, born and believing in the greatness of America, children of the 80s, shining city on the hill, the reasons we celebrate July 4th, these colors, whatever. We are... The point of Steve trying to highlight that picture is like again, if we're lucky if this is still just the 11th hour. Because, quite frankly, it may have already struck midnight. So take the chance that it ain't quite midnight yet, and then you must adjust your lives accordingly and get uncomfortable. That's just how it is.
You know, I want to harken back to one of the key messages from the DeSantis primary campaign, which is that decline is an option. You know, he always said that in the context of national decline, but it's always an option. Decline is always an option in your homes, in your life, in your churches, in your communities. It's always a choice that you make, but you don't have to make the choice. You don't have to make the choice to decline. You can choose another way. And again, this might not be the vessel. This might not be the vessel to fix all of our issues. In fact, I'm quite sure it's not. But at the end of the day, you can be the vessel in your neck of the woods. You could. Decline is always a choice. We might not have as much time as Todd was alluding to just then. We might not have as much time as we once did, but we still have a choice. So I know what decision I'm making. I know what decision these two are making. I know what a decision a lot of you have made as well, personally. Does this country have it within itself to make the right choice? We're going to find out.
Amen. More in a moment. Weren't following the news, a massive hit to the U.S. dollar came earlier this summer when the Saudis did not renew their 50-year petrodollar deal with the U.S. So since 1974, Saudi Arabia has sold oil solely in U.S. dollars. And that was huge to our global economic dominance. And now they want some options other than the U.S. dollar. So if there's less of a demand for the dollar, what happens to the dollar? And that's just one reason why more and more Americans are turning to gold, and you want to turn to our friends at Birch Gold Group for that. For over 20 years, they've helped tens of thousands of Americans protect their savings by converting an IRA or 401k into an IRA into physical gold. You can learn more by texting the word Steve to 998989898. They made it even simpler than it used to be. Text Steve to 989898 and claim your free, no-obligation info kit on gold. That's Steve to the number 989898. Birch Gold has the trust of so many people, thousands of happy customers, countless 5-star reviews. Protect your savings with gold before the dollar plunges any further. Text Steve to 989898 today. Well, back in June, there was a hearing with Anthony Fauci with much anticipation that was largely a dud. And I was so frustrated, as maybe the only human being on planet Earth. There might be somebody else. I'm not aware of whom it is. But I think I'm the only human being on planet Earth that has written 2 certified best-selling books about the COVID era and Anthony Fauci. And I was just beside myself at the fawning and the shallowness of the questions being queried by that little fiend. And then there was like this little ray of light. And I was like, okay, that's better. Who's that? Well, he joins us now. He is Dr. Rich McCormick, congressman from the state of Georgia and their 6th district. And he joins us here on the show. Congressman, it's a pleasure to have you with us here on The Blaze, brother. How are you?
I'm doing good. Good to be with you today.
And I want to double back to that hearing with Fauci if we could in a few minutes, but I would be remiss if I did not lead off with the address yesterday by Benjamin Netanyahu there in the Congress, and the reaction that he got, the protest outside, several leading figures in the other party, which frankly has dominated the Jewish vote for about 60 years in America, and yet they just could not be bothered with hearing what the leader of Israel had to say. And I just want to get your overall first-person account of what Bibi said and what it was like there inside the chamber.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to say it was a powerful speech, probably one of the best speeches I've heard in the chamber in my short time in Congress. He was succinct. He was to the point. He used some humor, but he also he talked about how important the United States is to Israel and Israel is to the United States as their sole true ally in that area. I mean, true democracy. I mean, we have some of the friends, and I've been all over the Middle East. I served a couple of tours in the Persian Gulf, a couple of tours in Africa, and I'm very thankful for places like Jordan. I think Jordan's been very friendly to us. Saudi Arabia continues to moderate, but really, if you want to talk about an age-old, not just religious ties, but I mean, just the entire strategic importance of Israel. He did a really good job of linking this up. And then he also talked about how the radical Islamic fundamentalists view us. And he's so spot on when he talks about us being the big Satan. Israel's a little Satan, but we are known as the big Satan. People are taught to hate us. Matter of fact, what was appalling is yesterday, you saw protesters literally go after the Liberty Bell down at Union Station, graffiti, destroy things, spray paint, all kinds of stuff, take down the flags, burn the flags. Now, I know it's a right that you can burn the flag, but you're not allowed to steal a flag and then vandalize property. That's illegal. Those people should have been arrested. Spot on right there. That was very disappointing. But last night, myself and several other congressmen went over there, replaced the flags, albeit with smaller flags, but nonetheless, the point was made that we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be held down. And we certainly shouldn't have people literally spraying Hamas is coming and raising a Hamas flag on American soil. Are you kidding me? A terrorist organization and then burning our flag? Golly. I mean, not just judgment by God, judgment by us. We should have put those people in jail for sure, for terroristic threats, for vandalism, for theft. It's unbelievable we didn't do more. Very disappointing to me, but we stand strong, and I thought Netanyahu did a really good job, as well as outlining how they have done everything they can to avoid civilian casualties. And war is a horrific thing. I was in the military for 21 years. I was an ER doctor for 4 of those, a Marine for 16 of those, and war is a horrible thing, but they have done everything they can to fight the cleanest possible war they could.
When the other side was making their machinations to get rid of Joe Biden to try to avoid a 1980, 1932 level 30-state plus loss, we had expressed on our show some concern that they might land on somebody like Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. We saw the way that, for example, the way that he had performed in light of the attempted assassination on President Trump. He clearly has some skill as a politician, for sure. And we had expressed some concern that they might go to him, and he might be way more difficult to beat. And several Jewish friends of mine in our industry and movement said, oh, that's never going to happen. I mean, there's no way the Democrats could nominate an actual Jew. And then the very next day, I watched John King. I saw a clip of John King on CNN just say out loud, Congressman, just say out loud on air. Now, it's technically national television because it's CNN. Most people didn't see it. Okay. But he just said out loud over the air, like this is just okay to say now, oh, he's too Jewish. He could never be the Democratic nominee. That would cause problems with the Democratic Party. What has transpired over there that the party that has been the home for the vast majority of the Jewish vote, both you and I's combined lifetimes, basically, now suddenly has an anti-Semitic wing that it has to actually cater to, acknowledge, to the point that, potentially, I hope not, but potentially the next president of the United States, Kamala Harris, just couldn't even be bothered to meet with Bibi Netanyahu while he was here. What's happening with your colleagues on the other side of that chamber right now?
Well, first of all, realize how radical a thought that is. There's never been a time in American history, and we had some really anti-Semitic thoughts in the past. We've had blatant anti-Semitism and blatant discrimination against minorities in the past. But I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime towards Jews. I mean, where you have thousands, tens of thousands of people sometimes massing, talking about annihilating a nation, annihilating a people, talking about Hamas, a charter organization that talks about eliminating Israel, eliminating Jews, about genocide as part of their charter. That is what people are literally chanting out here. Nothing like that has ever happened in my lifetime or in the history of the United States that I ever know. There's been racism, there's been but never at this level during my lifetime have I seen anything like this. Kamala basically ignores such an important speech for a sorority speech. Are you kidding me? That the Democrats not sure, over.
Aaron, let's try to reconnect with him. That connection's getting spotty. Give me a thumbs up when you've got him back. Okay. But Todd, I think I want to re-stress that point that I just made. I mean, the Democratic Party has received an overwhelming percentage of the Jewish vote, and that's not a large percentage of Americans. I want to say it's something like 2 or 3%, but it is still a percentage of Americans that have also been, in many cases, some of their biggest financial benefactors as a party over the years. And in response to that, for them to essentially just acknowledge now that anti-Semites are a wing of their base that has to be appealed to, has to be genuflected to, has to be recognized, has to be granted some standing and some level of accommodation. I just find that absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it's often said, you can't be a Christian and pro-choice. Well, any honest Jew should be asking right now, can you possibly be Jewish and be a Democrat? Do you remember just the context? I can't remember what it was a couple weeks ago when you were talking about early on in your career and how you were talking about Yom Kippur, and some local Des Moines Jewish leaders wanted to have a conversation with you about just that, which was pretty much a innocent misunderstanding. Where are the conversations right now about this? Because all that money you're talking about and loyalty in terms of votes, Really, it should be of an existential nature. Why are you even considering to be a Democrat if you're a Jew?
How large must this segment of their own base be? And how much has it seeped in to the belief system of their own side that you are willing to risk a constituency like this? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, like, I think that should be an indicator of one of two things. Either there's an extreme amount of belief in anti-Semitism over there, even amongst their leaders, or it's gained enough of a foothold that they have to cater to it in some respect in order to keep their own elective coalition together. We have Congressman McCormick back.
I think so.
All right. Mark, are you there? Can you hear me better this time?
It's Rich.
I'm sorry, Rich, are you there? Can you hear me better this time?
Apparently not.
No. Okay. We'll have to see if we can reschedule him now. It's just too late in the hour. But let me go back and reset what I just said again. What does it say that this has gained, this ideology has gained such a foothold within their party that they would risk reassembling their own coalition in order to acknowledge it and to fet it? I think that says something extraordinary.
I think it's the most important thing it says is there's one side that can be controlled, is willing to pull its punches, that basically they'll say to them, where else are you going to go? Mm-hmm. Because the other side out there, it has no problem burning down Washington, D.C. as we speak and raising the flag and taunting whoever the hell it wants to with no repercussions. So I think that's the bed they're sleeping in, and we should that's not even just a left side thing. Look at all the people on the right that are similarly manipulated by Republicans. Where else are you going to go? What else are you going to do? And we compromise and we compromise and we compromise, and now here we all live.
I'm looking right now at a chart of the Jewish vote in America historically. Let's start. I think we don't go any further back than say 1980, because then you're dealing pre-1980. You're dealing with the pre-realignment of the inclusion of the religious right. That was the last major realignment we had in American politics. Okay, but if you're curious, in 1976, for example, Jimmy Carter got 71% of the Jewish vote in America. 71% of it in 1976. Okay. But so in 1980, Democrats won it by 6. In 1984, Walter Mondale won it by 26 points, while Ronald Reagan was, mounting the biggest historical rout in the history of the Electoral College. Something we'll likely never ever see again. Dukakis, who got destroyed by George H.W. Bush, he won it by 19 points in 1988. Bill Clinton got 80% of the Jewish vote in 1992. Bill Clinton did. So when I say that this has been a reliable Democratic voting bloc for as long as you and I can remember, this is how far back this goes. Now, you do begin to see, in 2000, Al Gore won the Jewish vote 79-19 over George W. Bush, 79-19. You do believe to see with 9/11, okay, you start to see some of these margins, narrow a little bit with Islamic radicalism on our shores. No, you don't see that actually. In 2004, Kerry won it 76-24. In 2008, Obama won it 78-22. In 2012, Obama won it 69-30. In 2016, Hillary won it 71-24. And Trump got 30% of the Jewish vote in 2020. And that is the largest percentage any Republican had received since 1988, when George H.W. Bush got 35. This it's not even like it's been getting closer to Republicans, so they feel safer to just abandon that vote now. You see what I'm saying? This is an 80%, well, let's be conservative, 70% demographic for Democrats. And one that is, anti-Semitism is demonic. I also don't think demographics are bigotry. Let's face it, in terms of who can afford to give money to the Democratic Party, by and large, their Jewish base can afford to give a lot more money than their Black or Hispanic base. That's just the demographics of the country. Fair? Yeah. Okay. All right. So on top of the fact this is a loyal voting bloc, minimum 70%. and is also a very lucrative one at the same time. It's not like they've been flirting with Republicans and so like, okay, if that's how you're going to play this, then we'll just go ahead and... No, they just have just literally went Vader, I'm altering the deal, pray I don't alter it any further, and just pulled the rug out from right underneath their own coalition. What does it say about how much anti-Semitism has seeped into the highest levels of the Democratic Party that they risk doing this with a 70% minimum block of votes and one that can disproportionately stroke a lot of big checks at the same time?
It says I was right. I didn't know you were going to read that off before I said what I was just got done saying. But you've proven over time you are more than willing to be taken for granted. This faith is 5,000 years old, Steve. And it's clear based on what you just said that they more readily identify with being a Democrat than being a Jew. That's more powerful to them. Because if it was really more about being a Jew, to quote Sam Kinison, you'd move where the food is.
Especially post 9/11.
Yes, but you don't.
Yeah. And the reward that they have received from the Democratic Party for more aligning with them along the lines of what you're talking about. And what you've said is nothing different than what I've heard from our friends like Josh Hammer and Daniel Horowitz for many, many years. The reward that our Jewish friends have received from the Democratic Party for showing that level of fidelity is the highest ranking leaders, the most vocal faces of the party, are just openly genuflecting and pandering to anti-Semitism now, just out in the open.
I mean, did you see when Bibi walked by Chuck Schumer yesterday on the floor? Did you see that clip?
I did not, no.
It was just a very terse, Schumer barely even acknowledged him. Walked right by him, barely even acknowledged him.
Highest ranking Jewish official in American government.
Correct.
Charles Schumer. Yep. And for what?
Gays for Palestine.
What's the worst allegation here? That let's just let's not even agree to the integrity of it. The worst allegation here is that since the worst terrorist attack so far this entire century, okay, including 9/11, Bibi is right in what he said in that clip. If you do the demographics of it, in terms of how many Jews were killed,
did you have a problem with that?
I don't understand how anyone could have a problem with that. I don't. It's just simple demographics. Given the size of their population, the amount of people killed, it is like multiple 9/11s happened to them in one day. But the worst sin you could possibly say they're guilty of is that they've been too brutal in responding to the most brutal terrorist attack of this century. That's like the worst possible allegation that would have any credibility at all. You went too far to go after the people that killed all these Jews, and that's why he's getting the cold shoulder from Chuck Schumer. Wow. Theology Thursday is next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre, and all of you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, TikTok, and also Getter. And if you are on the podcast version of the program, thank you so much. Please, if you have not yet done so, leave us a 5-star review. And we thank and applaud all of you who have for your applause for us. And then also hit subscribe or follow if you're tuned in on iTunes right now. And that way, every time we do a new show, you can tune into it right there in your feed every single time. This part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. We again are lamenting where we are at right now as a culture and a society, and how little you can count on your government to do its job. We were discussing at the top of the hour, last hour, so the beginning of the show, the FBI director is saying that Crookman went online, Googled how far away was Oswald from JFK, and then right after that went and registered for the Trump rally.
As one would do.
As one does. And so we've got all this surveillance equipment, this never-ending surveillance state. We must be monitored down to the point of reach around to get on a plane. Now, only to have Math Club Killer Google how far away was Oswald from Kennedy, and then right after that, register for the Trump rally, and no alarm bells go off. Anybody else think you just can't trust much of this? And if you're not, you might not be thinking. So here's what I'm thinking. Same exact kind of stuff we saw with the healthcare system during COVID. Make sure you've got a backup of your healthcare. And that's what our friends at Jace Medical want to help you with the Jace case. You can get backups of some of the greatest antibiotics we've ever discovered, whom may be the next on the chopping block, maybe the next to be deemed dangerous. Don't prescribe right when we need them the most. But then you can also expand your Jace case as well for medications that your loved ones need to make sure you've got that peace of mind as well. Get it today. Get the Jace case today, JASE. JaceMedical.com is where you want to go. JaceMedical.com. And if you enter the code DACE, my last name, at checkout, you'll get a discount there on your order. All right, so code DACE at checkout for the discount on your order at Jace Medical, JASE, JaceMedical.com. All right, let's continue on Theology Thursday. And normally we would do, for the end of the month here, your grab bag. But since I hijacked on an Audible last week's discussion to discuss something that I thought was very timely and important for us to discuss, and hopefully you agreed, I want to make sure we get back to the word here to make up for it this week. And we left off with Romans chapter 3, verse 9. And so this entire chapter has been about the standard of God's righteousness, how it's been upheld among Jew and Gentile alike, that God is no respecter of persons, okay? And so what would that mean, for example? If in particular, what would that mean if you're Jewish? This idea that you are not in requirement for absolution of your sins through Christ because of your religious system is not true. And that those religious systems were basically a foreshadowing of what Christ would ultimately do at the cross. And for the Gentile, it means, as what Paul would say at another aspect of his ministry in the book of Acts, when he goes and speaks at the Areopagus, and some of you know this as Mars Hill. And he says, essentially, for a time, God let you pagan fools, you Gentile uncircumcised fools, for a time, he lets you get away, okay, with not knowing whom the one true God is, and his only living and sharper than a double-edged sword word, right? For a time, he let that happen. That time is now at an end. Okay, that time is over. Okay, and so you guys need to recognize, if you didn't already, that there's no other way, okay, to God, the one true God, other than through his son, Jesus Christ, right? That's kind of where we left off here.
It is.
As we head to verse 9. All right.
Yes.
So let's do verses 9 through 18 together, if you guys are okay with this.
Yeah, I think that's a must.
So Paul, writing in chapter 3, starting in verse 9 in Romans, says, "What then are we Jews?" And remember, do not forget Paul is a Jew. "Are we Jews any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks," and so Jew or Gentile. And remember, in the Jewish vernacular, the world is divided into two kinds of people, Jews and Gentiles. So when Paul says both Jew and Gentile, what does he mean? The entire world, everybody. That's what he means, okay? "Both Jews and Greeks are under sin, as it is written." And he's quoting, I think, here from Psalm 53, I think, is what he's quoting from here.
Well, it's an amalgamation of different
ones.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. "None is righteous, no, not one. No one understands. No one seeks for God." The word none and no one in Hebrew and Greek means what?
None.
None. That means none. No one in the original Hebrew or Greek means no one. It means absolutely no one. No one seeks after God. Abram did not walk out of his father's idol-making store and say, "I looked up in the sky and pondered, whom is this unknown God of gods, the God who's one and above all gods, and I shall call on him of my own free will and ponder if such a being..." No, God actually had to take the initiative and go to Abram because he was a sinner. So he wasn't seeking after God. No one is righteous. Not one. No one understands. No one seeks after God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps or snakes is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood, and their paths are ruin and misery. And the way of peace they have not yet known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. All right. Who wants to begin this week?
I do, because I'm pretty sure, and that was my instinct, and the way you highlighted rhetorically, this might be the most controversial Scott Hahn assessment of what we just read, and particularly in light of a lot of the stuff that's online these days between Catholics and Protestants. Paul quotes from several Psalms that actually distinguish those who are righteous in Israel from those who are wicked. No doubt these references support Paul's contention that sin has established a beachhead in Israel, but that is not the same thing as saying that every member of the covenant people is a godless rebel, down to the last woman or man. How then can Paul deny the possibility of even a single Jew being righteous when he draws from Psalms that affirm the distinction between righteous and unrighteous Jews in no uncertain terms? Again, his argument works as a collective indictment, which you led off pointing out that we just got done doing, Steve, as a collective indictment of Israel, viewed as a nation alongside other sinful nations, but not as a distributive indictment of every single Jew considered individually. And then this is important. He goes on, Paul submits the chain of biblical passages from the Psalms as evidence of what the law says. The statement is curious since none of the citations is taken from the Torah specifically in the narrow sense of the 5 books of Moses. Paul is using a shorthand expression for the full collection of Israel's scriptures, which was sometimes identified in a broad sense as the law. See John 10:34, 15:25, 1 Corinthians 14:21. The indictment then being aimed at those under the law is directed at the covenant people whose faith and life are defined by the teachings of the Old Testament.
Which you think is controversial. Why?
Well, the way you highlighted it generally, and then what often is seen online these ways is a total depravity at the individual level, and we discussed, and I'm more interested now in the follow-up of you have to say in light of that. But clearly, I think there's many Protestants of an evangelical nature who would take exception to the fact that while the general may apply, Jews and Greeks, they would say, oh, you're darn right, he's talking about the specificity of every single soul. At least that's the impression that I'm getting. So I'm more interested in now just listening because, I find it fascinating. This has been edifying for me. The laying out of the Psalms, and within those Psalms saying yes, all the things that it just said. But if you go to the Psalms themselves, they'll also talk about the righteous, who they were, what they did. So I don't know. I want to see how you both reacted to that, and then where that goes from here. And the gentleman you're citing as your scriptural excerpts, because it doesn't strike me as Scott Hahn is saying anything without scriptural basis and solid exegetical footing, but I know he's saying that at least in some applications amongst evangelical Protestants, I know that they would consider them fighting words on some level.
I have an obscure question to ask you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is true or not, and so I'm genuinely curious when I ask this. Okay. But and it's been several years since I've researched a lot of this. But I as you were talking and clarifying what you think Scott Hahn means there, I was hearkening back to I've talked before I went through like an initial 3-year period after my conversion of just like hardcore read everything I can, research everything I can, watch everything I can, listen to everything I can, right? Okay, and try to learn where these historic differences and distinctions and arguments and debates come from, and their source materials and things of that nature. And if I'm clumsy on this, and there's anybody Catholic in the audience, forgive me. It's not an intent to. I'm genuinely pulling something out of the recesses of my memory that's not quite as photographic as prodigious at 51 as it was at 41. Okay. But I seem to recall coming upon something or a reference to something called baptism by desire. Does that ring a bell to you?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
Okay, you have heard of this?
Yes.
Okay. And it's the idea that, well, I don't know. I'm asking. Is it by desire, meaning that, does it mean that if I don't specifically recognize Christ as Lord, but I've lived some kind of a life that indicates, that aligns with his righteousness, that I'm at least indicating that I had a desire to be baptized and into his covenant by the way I lived, as opposed to what I actually claimed I believe? Is that kind of what that means, or does it mean something totally different?
No, I mean, in the ballpark, and I'm not citing. Here's what I'm not citing official teaching here, but my recollection of all this is it's impugning. It's how God impugns grace to the world in ways beyond our Christian, almost like first world convention. It's like whether they don't have the part of the world that simply does not have access to, and or under dire, just because for any number of reasons, and or under dire circumstances, there's simply not the time to access actual formal baptism. That the grace of God, it's well. Here's something you always say. Could have God have done things this way? Yes, but he did things this way, and you often say God could do anything any way he wants to. Does God have norms throughout history that he works with? Yes. Does he also go outside of those norms? Yes. So I'm not claiming to give the formal encyclopedic, but you were in the ballpark of something that is more has been philosophized upon within the annals of Christendom, of course.
I don't remember the exact quote, and I'm pulling this again out of my memory banks from, I think it was earlier this year. Was it this year or last year that one of our fellow believers in this industry claimed Ben Shapiro was a Christian on the basis of...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that even though he denies that Jesus is his Messiah, the way that he lives is in alignment with with Christ's righteousness, and with that, was he citing that doctrine?
No. Well, I don't know. You can't specifically deny Christ, and for assuming, for the sake of argument, that baptism of desire, as loosely as you and I have described it, is a thing. That can't happen while you're actively denying Christ.
Okay.
You cannot.
And by the way, do you understand why I even brought any of this up? I'm trying to make sense of what he is. I mean, this is.
I don't know.
I'm trying to make sense of what Han is alluding to. Okay, because I don't have I don't agree with that interpretation of what these scriptures are saying at all, and so this is why I'm trying to figure out: are there fundamental differences in what Catholics and Protestants believe about what it means to be outside the state of grace, and how you can enter into that formally or informally. That's why I brought this up. I didn't have, hey, ask Todd about baptism by desire. When I was working out this morning, it wasn't on my list. It just popped into my head as I was listening to you share what Han had to say. So, okay. Anything else before we find out what Sproul thinks?
No, I want to hear how both of you.
All right, Aaron, go ahead.
So I think maybe I'm trying to think of a practical example of what you two were just talking about. I think Sproul kind of addresses this Paul quotes kind of an amalgamation of Psalms and Isaiah in this passage. And in verse 12, there is none who does good, no, not one. So some argue it's one thing to say people are not righteous, but surely you're not going to say that no pagan ever does anything good. We have seen pagan soldiers lay down their lives for their brothers on the battlefield, and pagan mothers sacrificing themselves to save their children. Calvin calls this civic righteousness. And here's what he has to say. And maybe this addresses what Todd is talking about here. From our perspective, there are good deeds, but if we define goodness the way God does, the verdict comes a little differently. From a biblical standpoint, there are two aspects to a good deed. When God weighs our actions, he weighs whether they correspond outwardly to his law, outwardly. God requires honesty, and if we are honest, we do not cheat on our income taxes or steal. It's good that we do not steal. It's good that we do not cheat. So far, so good. We have that external conformity to the law of God. However, when God evaluates our behavior, not only does he judge the outward action, he also considers the work, the inward motivation. Therefore, for people to do good in God's sight, they not only have to do something that externally conforms to his law, but they also must be motivated in that action by a heart that is trying to please God, a heart that loves him completely with the whole mind, which Sproul then contends and gives reasons why there's no human who ever has been able to fully be inwardly motivated, whether in heart or whether in the knowledge of God, perfectly good, with perfect goodness. And that's what Sproul's contention is. I'm not sure if that relates to what Todd you kind of brought up there or not.
What would you say in response to that?
Well, why don't you go to your and see where the hangs in the balance?
He says many of the same things. I was just reading it as I was looking at it before I went to Aaron. He says many of the same things, just quoting from the King James, because he's also preaching in the latter half of the 19th century. But Charles Spurgeon says many of the same things in terms of what this means and who it applies to. And he was a believer in total depravity, that everyone was a sinner. Not utter depravity, not the same thing. Okay, and that's kind of the distinction I hear Sproul drawing there, Aaron.
Correct.
Okay, that we are able to do good things on some level because we still claim the mirror image of God. We are reflecting his image back to the world, okay? We're not beyond redemption. We're not incapable of doing good things, okay? What we're talking about is the kind of good, though, that makes up and for the sins that we have committed, that absolves us of our sin, the stain of our flesh. That's a different standard of good, okay? And that's why Jesus says no one is good but God.
Legislating morality versus legislating righteousness.
Correct, yeah, okay? And so those are some of the themes that Spurgeon gets into here as well.
Yeah, I think that distinction about what you've said about utter depravity.
And that's why I asked you about, oh, by the way, I didn't finish that. I should finish that. So utter depravity means we're beyond redemption. We are incapable of showing any light whatsoever, okay? Total depravity is the idea that because is the sin, the stain of sin, all creation groans, as Paul writes, I think in this book actually, that the stain of sin is so overwhelming that we could not possibly bridge the chasm of holiness between us and God, no matter how hard we try.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Agreed.
And that's what total depravity means. Okay. And so therefore, because of that, God must initiate. God must act. Okay. That we cannot come to an understanding of him, and we cannot come to a saving faith in him unless he takes the initiative with us and acts. And all throughout the scriptures, he has to take the initiative every single time. That's what total depravity means.
Agreed. Catholics have no problem with that. I think this is the second time now where on this show we've got to something where we find out why the three of us can have conversations that seem much more edifying and constructive than happens often online in these things. And it has to do with what you said, the difference between total and utter, and when we've talked about scripture, you said the difference between sola and solo scripture, which you alluded to a couple weeks ago. And I think I'm encouraged because actually I hear I don't hear three men yelling at each other in what we've read so far.
Now, I will say, in fairness to that, and I think because we're all friends, I can say this to the three of us and everybody would get it. I do think that if we got into the argument that there's a level of righteousness that can be achieved that doesn't require us to acknowledge Christ, then I think we'd probably start yelling at each other. And that's why I asked you what baptism by desire meant, because I'm trying to figure out what Scott Hahn means, because I don't know. I don't really know what he is alluding to. Okay, and so that's why I asked about that. Was I'm trying to figure out, is there some kind of I'll use the term because I don't know how else to rephrase it. Extra biblical. Okay, is there some sort of extra biblical insurance policy embedded in Catholic teaching that those of us who are sola scriptura would not be aware of or acknowledge? You see what I'm trying to say? Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think I didn't know where you were going to go with that, and I just was paying you the courtesy of. But I don't think Scott Hahn is talking about that at all. He mentions how do you account for the fact scripturally that the very Psalms that are being cited to say that there is no one righteous, not one, those exact same Psalms say that there are the righteous.
Right. As could be made righteous at that time. Okay, small r, by their obedience, and even in their imperfection, but their obedience and acknowledgement to at least wanting to follow God's word and God's law as it was known at that time. That's what we would say, Aaron. Correct? That's what we would say. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, and that revelation is small p progressive. Okay, because Paul's going to allude many times in the New Testament. This mystery of connecting these dots and what did all these things mean? Okay, and now these mysteries are being revealed of what their answers were. Okay, that Christ is basically the Rosetta Stone, the key that unlocks these mysteries that Jews had pontificated on and written tomes about and rabbinic traditions about for centuries. That Christ is now going to clarify what these things mean. Okay, and what they meant in their entirety the entire time. That's what he's alluding to.
And I think at the end of the day as well, we would respond. In Protestant land, we would respond to that. That at the end of the day, the righteousness that's discussed here, it doesn't come out of a human being's own volition. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, even if they are counted righteous, it's not because of that. It might have been something that they did, but it was in spite of themselves, not because of themselves. That makes sense.
Now, but Scott Hahn would agree with that. My point in bringing it up, these are clearly used on a regular basis. We would have had this conversation amongst the three of us, but neither one of you have ever pulled me aside and said, like I hear on a regular basis, Todd, I love you. You're really courageous. You saved me during COVID, but repent because you're going to hell because you're Catholic. I get that a lot. Mm-hmm. You guys have never done that.
Because I don't think that's a biblical standard. If I did, I would say that. I think the biblical standard is by their fruits you will know them.
But that's the way.
If you don't have your fruit and your love for God's word, the life you have lived, the family that you have led, the courage you have shown, the humility before our Lord you have demonstrated, if those aren't fruits of salvation, then I honestly don't know what they are, and I need to reevaluate the entirety of my own understanding of the Word of God.
And I'm right back with you.
Now, did I say I agree with everything you think?
We don't, but we're honest about all that, and everybody can say and see that every single day. Yet, and I think it has to do with the degree to which these scriptural passages are taken to so hollow out the very notion that we are created in the image and likeness of God. None of that means that, we've spent 3 chapters now, neither Jew nor Greek, all. And that's where we just got done leaving off at the passages before this.
Now, I'm willing, now, just like I've got your back on the fruit of on what ultimately is the standard for salvation. Mm-hmm. Historically, we have to be honest, when some of these questions were raised in given times in history, hey, I just want to have a debate, I just want to have a discussion, people were kind of told you weren't allowed to have these kinds of discussions and these debates. I mean, the church has not had it did not have, necessarily say, yeah, come now, let us reason together. We love to have these disputations. That it wasn't the most open forum, I guess, for having these kinds of conversations and debates about what do these things actually mean. That's historically accurate as well. Fair?
Oh, yeah. What?
Yeah. I mean, Douglas Wilson said in our show yesterday, when Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door, he had no idea he was going to start, essentially, World War I. He had no freaking clue. He thought he was just asking for an academic, debate. He had no idea that literally the very foundations of Western civilization were going to, be at stake with the various questions that he was asking. What would have happened if the bishop would have just shown up and just said, "Hey, let's have a conclave and have an open conversation and debate these things"? I have no idea what would have happened. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. We'll never know what would have happened. But that's not the response that he got. Basically, the response he got was,
shut your hole
and know your role. That was basically the response that he got.
When I say that, and I thought that was implied by that, it's absolutely a two-way street now and within history. But there's the heresy of basically hollowing out our existence to such an extent that the creation itself, and Steve, this is a heresy that goes way, way back, that the creation itself is evil. Mm-hmm. That's what I think
which we're into Gnosticism and things of that nature with that.
Upon when we, and that's what Scott. Now here's where I'm giving Scott Hahn a lift. I'm imputing what I think where he would go next with this, but that we are not. Yes, we are. That's utter depravity. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're garbage. Mm-hmm. No, we're not. God knows every hair on our head. We're not garbage. We're not created to be garbage. We are created in His image and likeness.
Correct. And God did not die for garbage.
No.
Yeah.
So, but more and more, we keep seeing me walking up to that path that we're spit on the ground, and I think the three of us have no truck with that, but I'm seeing the otherwise quite frequently out within the Twitterverse of people who consider them quite serious.
Aaron, you just have something you want to add here before the break?
Well, I definitely want to talk about verse 11 when we come back, if we can. I think that I need to think about what Todd said a little bit before responding to that.
Okay. We'll do that, and we'll see if we get to verse 19 and the conclusion of this section, verses 19 or 20, when we return. Stay tuned. There are those who lead, and then there are those who follow. And if you're going into the real estate market, chances are you can't lead yourself. You need an agent. But where would you find one that you can trust, especially in these unprecedented times?
Bing, 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 bing.
Indeed, all the bing, bing, bings. Make sure you go to this website because the name says it all. realestateagentsitrust.com, again, is where you want to go. And there you're going to find an agent that we have validated, verified their track record of success before we list them in the database there and recommend them to people like you. And a lot of times you're going to find they're from the same audience right here with the Blaze as you. So you have values in common too. Okay, so that should just help bolster the idea this is someone that you can trust. So whether you want to go across town or you need to go across the country, in arguably the most difficult real estate market in American history, now is the time to make sure more than ever you've got an agent you can trust at realestateagentsitrust.com. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, so Aaron, we kind of continued on with Todd the conversation that he was alluding to before we went to the break, and I think both of us kind of now have a better understanding of what he was addressing or where he was coming from. So I want to give you a shot to go ahead and respond to what he said there in our Theology Thursday study.
Yeah, I think Todd's concern is he sees a lot of professing believers extolling the perfection of God at the expense of God's creation, particularly human beings. And it is in talking about this during the break as well, that there is an inclination to use our fallen nature, whether it's in different branches of theology or what have you, an inclination to use our fallen nature as an excuse for not doing. That we are only spirit beings, basically.
Yes.
And our actions don't matter. And that's clearly not what Scripture teaches.
Which is closer to the Gnostic heresy,
Correct.
Actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think I understand, and I'm jiving with what Todd is saying now.
I mean, it's not on our list of partners to promote today, but I'll bring it up. There's a list, that's the David Bahnsen book about work we're talking about. And this is a lament that I have with American Protestantism, is the complete jettisoning of tradition. I'm not in favor of either saying tradition is sacred on par with Scripture. If I were, I'd go to church with Todd. Nor am I in favor, though, of acting as if it has no value whatsoever. Okay? No value whatsoever. And this idea that, well, and that's how you end up falling for these kinds of canards. And that's why you see a lot of Protestant believers where church in the suburbs is like the Greek experience, not the Christian experience.
Oh, I want to get in that with verse 11 here.
Yeah, you're not given. What do I mean by the Greek experience? To the Greeks, work, engagement were for lower menial tasks beneath them. Contemplation, pontification, personal betterment, okay? Those were the hallmarks of the Greek life. What do you see happen in a lot of American suburban churches? I'm not engaged. I'm not personally involved in what's going on out there. There's way more discussions about how I can be home more with my kids than how I can actually set the right example and leave a legacy for them. Okay, which is, by the way, I'm not saying, work and never be home, but the idea, though, if you take that to the meaning that work has no value, then okay,
yeah.
and being a stay-at-home dad on Zoom, okay, that goes too far the other way. And then the idea of personal betterment, okay, much of megachurch suburban Christianity is on the Protestant side, how to be better at things, rather than how to be on mission. Because the incarnation, as you were pointing out during the break, we again mirror that image too. Okay? The hope of glory, as Paul writes in Colossians, Christ in us, Christ alive in us and through us. We are, just as we mirror him, we all carry the image of God. We carry it all the more post-salvation. Now we have the hope of glory within us. Christ is shining through us to others.
Yes.
All right? That incarnation wasn't a one-time event. It carries on and forth in each one of us. We are temples of the Holy Spirit. There are missions for us to fulfill. Okay, and for some people, there might be a contemplative mission. Some people are called to be great theologians and to ponder these deep questions and to come up with the context of the answers for our inquisitive minds and to give us the peace of God's plan when we don't understand everything. But that's not for everybody.
One body, many parts. Yes.
Yeah, and there's way too little actual take my faith out into the world and do something with it, as opposed to, well, God saved me to make for me. Is that kind of what you're alluding to? Because that is prevalent in Protestantism for sure.
I appreciate
the same Jesus who gave teachings. Oh, this is a hard teaching. Also washed feet, which were really, really disgusting. He got down into the nitty gritty. He did the work. He taught the things that needed to be taught. It was a both and in his ministry. And he knew he was going to suffer an incredibly bloody and painful, excruciating death on the cross as well.
Amen. So we're talking about the Greek idea of engagements being beneath us, just contemplating forever, pontificating forever. That's the ideal life. And by the way, that's what's inhabited many of your modern universities. And it's not just that they're turning out people with un-American viewpoints. They don't even have an American work ethic. Like how do I do a job? How do I work? How do I apply for a job? How do I function? How do I take rejection? How do I ask a girl out? How am I married? I mean, we've got all kinds of people with all these degrees and they don't know how to function as a basic human because they've just been told and taught on top of just the rot gut that they're taught ideologically in terms of way of life, that endless adolescence is the ideal. A lack of taking on responsibility and calling is bad, or is good, I should say. And the mission true is you. You're the mission. YOLO.
Yes.
Thankfully, we've got a remnant of universities like Heritage that are still doing it the old-fashioned way. And that's why they're also one of the few universities in America celebrating not Independence Day, but Independence Day month. And throughout the month of July, if you want to get access to this outstanding video with a portrayal of Thomas Jefferson as he reflects on the meaning of the Declaration of Independence in a letter that he wrote late in his life, you can go watch this video right now at daceforhillsdale.com. That's FOR, daceforhillsdale.com. And they'll also give you a free commemorative copy of the Declaration of Independence. That's something I think that ought to be, frankly, in every American home. It's only the mission statement for the country that we live in that we're trying to save. Okay? daceforhillsdale.com is where you want to go to see the video and get your copy of the Declaration. daceforhillsdale.com. All right, Aaron, you want to zero in on verse 11. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is, there is none who seeks after God. No one in his natural condition seeks after God. Seeking after God is the business of the believer. The moment we become Christian is the moment when our quest for God begins. Prior to our conversion, we were fugitives from God. We fled from him. Churches today structure worship, teaching, and preaching toward the pagan to help him find what he desperately is searching for, but just cannot seem to uncover.
Yes.
But it is foolish to structure worship for unbelievers who are seeking after God when the Bible tells us there aren't any seekers. It manifests as a failure to understand the things of God. If we understood the things of God, we'd know there's no such thing as unconverted seekers. And he goes on to quote and channel Aquinas in talking about this very question is, it seems like Elon Musk is seeking after God sometimes. It seems like various unconverted pagans we see out there, maybe in popular culture, they're asking questions, they're seeking after God, but really, at the end of the day, what they might be coming to close to the moment of following him, really. But what they're actually looking for is peace, joy, love. They're actually seeking the accoutrements of the quest for God, not actually God. They're trying to score a touchdown without the ball in their hands, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it's foolishness for churches. You just invoked the suburban mega churches. It's foolish to structure your worship service for believers to try to find unconverted. It doesn't make any sense. You're trying to give the pagan something that they can only have when they search for actually begin their quest for God and convert.
And cease being pagans.
And to cease being pagans.
Yes.
So anyway, I thought that was important to bring up in this.
I mean, the entire model of the modern American church, from Willow Creek to Saddleback, which basically are the progenitors of much of this, is just 100%. It's the upside down, inverted model of what you see practiced in the scriptures. It's just not. The ratio of evangelism to discipleship that we do in the modern American church is upside down, meaning that we did mission trips, to go find unbelievers. But that was an external operation of the church. The main messaging of the church was the equipping of the saints from the pulpit. You see what I'm trying to say? That evangelism was a missiology that occurred external, from what occurred on Sunday mornings. Sunday mornings was about equipping the saints to keep them on mission. The whole ratio, and it's the opposite. Now it is, the teaching is shallow on Sunday to reach the broadest audience of people possible, and a whole bunch of people come forth and claim they gave their life to Christ, and then you look a year later, let alone 5 or 10, and the fruit just isn't there, false conversions. They did feel guilty about their sins once, and they got that off their chest. They got it off their chest. But now they're not on any form of mission. The fruit is not there. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
You made them, they're like, oh gosh, I feel better, thank you. I knew what I did was wrong and I just needed my conscience assuaged, No, you are not your own, sir. You were bought at a high price, the price of someone else's life. This isn't about clearing your conscience. It was about creating one. Giving you one. Not clearing it, giving you one. Understanding what it means to actually have a conscience in the first place, because it's not about, I'm sorry if I offended you. I didn't mean to do that, or my intentions were good. I want to take this load and burden off of me. Yes, Jesus will do that for you, but for the intent of giving you a conscience now, so you can actually be whom he created you to be. And that's going to take some discipline or discipling. And our ratio in the church in America, in the Protestant church, I can't speak for what goes on your side of the street. Don't go there on Sundays. On my side of the street, I can tell you what goes on. The ratio is 100% upside down. It's like 80% evangelism on Sunday mornings, 20% discipleship. And a lot of times that 20%, you got to come back again on Sunday nights, where they do the real teaching for the people who are actually the true believers, that won't worry about driving people away and not putting as much in the collection plate, I'm sure, coincidentally.
And I think it's what's interesting, and that's my frustration, and fascinating how this dovetails with what we've been talking about. That's a problem both on the too harsh side and on the too mild side.
Correct. We could have done this if this technology existed 75 years ago. I might have a completely different... I might be saying, guys, we're like doing no outreach at all. Like you're only just, and we're just baptizing the same children. We're not reaching out in the community. Yeah. We got a lot of people, our neighbors, they're voting the right way. They're flying American flags, but they're not in church on Sunday. They're total heathen. You see what I'm saying? It depends on, understand the signs of the times in which you live. And the temptation to err on the side of grace or truth. Okay. And, the Gospel of John says that Jesus, full of grace and truth, simultaneously. All right. Yeah. So we err on these things, and the pendulum swings back and forth in different eras. But we are in an era now where everyone's heard how much God loves them. Everybody's heard Jesus is the my buddy. My Jesus, Jesus, wherever I go, he goes. We've all heard this, and it hasn't worked on this era. So guess what? Instead of doing what doesn't work, unless what we're just trying to work is a big fat collection plate. If we're trying to do that, keep going on, and then understand what synagogue of Satan really means when you go to meet your maker, and he teaches you the word hireling. Okay, but if you really think you're doing good, all the fruit of the culture says you're not. It says the exact opposite result is occurring from the seeds you claim you are planting, which means, as they said in the movie Mr. Mom, you're doing it wrong.
Yes.
What we need now, the pendulum is swung so far now that we've gone from the love of Christ to Jesus is my buddy, or as Aaron said last week, the worship songs were Jesus is my boyfriend. Okay, it's time to now make Jesus Lord again. Okay. It's time to understand what the fear of God means again. It's time for the old-time religion again. The pendulum's gone too far the other way. All right, I'll give you the last word here, Todd, in just a second, all right? Let me make sure I mention our friends over at Lumen. Do you mind for just a minute?
Yeah, go.
All right. They're the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even your stress management. So all you got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning. You'll know what's going on with your metabolism, and then they'll give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also use it during the day if you want, before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on with your body in real time. This might be what you're looking for to figure out, why am I stalled out or not making the progress I want? This may be the key to give you the information that you're looking for about your metabolism, because that is your body's engine. All right, so if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me, Lumen, lumen.me/Steve. That's lumen.me/Steve. You'll get 15% off your Lumen purchase when you do. That's lumen.me/Steve. All right, and you'll get 15% off at Lumen, Lumen, lumen.com/Steve. All right, Todd, go ahead.
You just laid out the too mild side perfectly. Either it's a childlike nursery rhyme, or it's just adult therapy. So either way, you're just me. You're never sent on mission, because it's never relational, which then you're just defying the Trinity. But on the too harsh side, you end up at the exact same place. I'm saved, but the world has gone to hell in a handbasket. Let it burn. I'm just going to sit here, and you don't go out either. Mm-hmm. See, they're both heretical.
Correct.
You're not going out. And that was my frustration. If people are just garbage, you're saved, but they're garbage, I don't know how you square that with the mind of God. He's ultimately relational. And yes, mock the sing-song church over there, but if you're not going out either, you've set yourself apart in a way that, quite frankly, yes, there is a setting apart, but you're not doing it in God's way.
I just would say amen to that, Aaron. You? In 30 seconds?
Yeah, the same. There is a lot of stinking thinking everywhere you turn. A lot of stinking thinking. But I'm glad we're able to have these conversations in charity as well.
Yes.
The bottom line is loving God with your heart. Yes. Loving God with your body. Yes. Loving God with your actions. Yes. If there's anything we see from Scripture is that when we're asked, is it either or, a lot of the times the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what a lot of people get wrong. Either on the action side, I wish that was the problem that we had more, or on the kind of the fake intellectual side where it's just, well, this is all just a spiritual battle. You know, this mortal coil is of no value. That's also an error as well, I'm convinced.
Mm-hmm. We're going to stick around and do 3 questions for subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on The Blaze. Until then, Romans 8:28.